All right. So let's get back to talking about the construction of our questionnaire. So we also need to think about our wording, right? So the negative wordings that we might be using. So for example, think about how we're phrasing negative questions. So do you feel, for example, do you feel that the city should not approve the proposed women's shelter? So I hope you kind of stopped for a second and thought, well, what does that mean? What are you trying to say? And most people would have to read that question twice, right? So that not approved sort of puts a wrench in it. So think about making that sentence a little bit more simple. We also have yay saying and nay saying. So you may have seen a survey where you have a series of questions and you can answer from I strongly agree to I strongly disagree. And inevitably, you always get that one person that'll read a couple of questions and be like, yeah, I'm not doing this. And then just go along and keep on circling agree, 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 agree. Now, the person could in fact agree with everything, but the person could also just be filling out a question and just filling out the questionnaire, not really reading any of the questions. The problem is, from a data perspective, you actually don't really know the difference, right? Because you can't ask a participant while they're filling it out. So what can you do? What is a way that we could deal with this? So I'm going to give you an example from our 10-item personality inventory, or the TIPI. You may have heard of the Big Five if you've taken social psychology or personality psychology. Well, this is a condensed survey. So while the original Big Five has 56, I think, questions, something like that, the TIPI has condensed that into just 10 questions. It uses the same scale, disagree strongly to agree moderately, but look at how they're asking the questions. So here, extroverted, I see myself as extroverted, enthusiastic, critical, quarrelsome, dependable, self-disciplined, anxious, easily upset, open to new experiences, complex. But this is where we get into something very interesting. So look at question 1. I see myself as extroverted or enthusiastic. So if you're strongly extroverted, you would answer 7, right? 6 or 7. But we have another question that asks it from the opposite perspective. I see myself as reserved or quiet. Now, if I'm an individual who is really extroverted, how am I going to answer that question? Well, more than likely, you're going to say 1 or 2, right? I disagree with this strongly, or I disagree with this moderately. And the reason why we ask this is because we ask some questions from the positive direction and some questions from the negative direction. This way we know if our participant is actually reading the question itself. So there are different ways that we can ask questions within a survey. We can obviously have these close-ended responses, which is what we have with our strongly agree to strongly disagree, meaning we force participants to answer the question using the answer choices that we've provided. This is different from an open-ended response scale, where I'm leaving things blank and open and asking participants then to put in the answer that they are thinking, right? We're not giving them a selected amount of choices. So here would be an example of the different types of questions we can have. So here you've got kind of that open-ended responses, and then here you've got your close-ended. So here we've clearly given the ability for a person to answer in a question. Here we're telling you that these are the answer choices. Each of these have positives and negatives. So I had a student a couple of semesters ago, and he wanted to look at sort of smoking behavior, right? And he asked the question, how many cigarettes did you smoke? And he got people, and he left it as an open-ended question, right? Because he wanted to know the number. People responded yes. And he said, what am I supposed to do with this, right? And the problem is you can't do anything with it. You got to toss out the data because clearly they smoked, but they weren't telling you how many cigarettes they smoked, which was what he was asking. Now, of course, we can't always give every numerical value that could ever exist. So we have to pick and choose what we're going to leave open-ended and what we might leave close-ended. But each of these are going to give us something different. Now, with our close-ended, for example, how do you feel today? We've given you only a range of 5 different emotions. What if you're feeling something else? What if you're feeling a combination of those emotions? Can you select both of them? Why can't I put something else in, right? And so this could be a problem with that close-ended as opposed to having just a box and then we allow people to put in their answer. So we also need to think about how we're going to allow our participants then to put in those answer choices. So thinking about kind of the number of responses, it needs to be a fixed number. We should have yes or no. Are you going to use yes or no? Are you going to use agree or disagree? Is just having something like this where you strongly agree and strongly disagree and then let people fill in the blanks over here, is that good enough? Should you label all of those points, right? We call them anchor points. Should you label all of those? Only you can decide that. And there isn't, again, a right or wrong. It's just how your participants are going to interpret that survey or that scale. If it's individuals who are very comfortable and they know and taken a lot of these surveys, they might be able to impute for themselves kind of what these mean. For others, it might not be the case. So in that population, you might want to give every single label. You want to also think of a quantitative range. It is best practice to use an odd numbered scale. And why might that be? Of course, you can't answer me. So the reason why we say that an odd number is best is because it allows for you to have a 0 point. So if I have agree, disagree, right? That's only 2. But now if I have neither agree nor disagree, that's my middle point. That's my anchor. So it allows somebody to not pick either side. It's really nice to have that odd number scale for that reason. When we use a rating scale, we can actually use different formats. Use what's best for your research population. Maybe you need to use some sort of graphic rating scale and you have people, something like this, just mark somewhere along the way. So you say to them, how would you rate the movie that you just saw? And you have people simply put in a mark where they feel like they stand. And then you use a ruler to kind of obtain the score. You rate them from 0 to 100. You also need to think about kind of the semantic differences in a scale. So your respondent is asked to rate a concept, a person, an object, a behavior, an idea on this sort of bipolar adjective. Does it make a difference, the adjectives or the anchors that you're using? So here we want to look at smoking cigarettes. Good or bad, strong or weak, active or passive. Each of these things might make my participant, right, look at and interpret the scale in a slightly different way. So again, use what's best for your population. You might also have a population who is unable to read. So let's take, for example, we have kids. They actually use this as a pain scale for children. So if you ask kids, rate your pain level, I don't know, they might not have had a lot of pain before, or they don't know how to quantify it. But instead, we can show drawing something like this to children and say, using this scale, please tell me how much your stomach hurts, right? So they can point to a different face. Now, as a child gets older, we could have them read this, or we could have them use this scale down here. But each of these are asking the same question, right? Or asking the same question. The scale, how it's presented, is going to be slightly different. So here's another example. Before, we were just showing you the anchor points. We can also label some of these points in between. So now you've got your strongly agree, undecided, disagree, strongly disagree. And now I know exactly what each of these points stand for. So you've made your questionnaire. What are you going to do with it? Well, you should think about finalizing that questionnaire. So formatting it. Overall, if you look at a survey, if the font is different size, if the spacing is off, if the scales don't seem to match up in terms of the points, it actually turns people off. They're actually less likely to take part in your survey. So appearance matters. How easy it is to read and interpret matters. And so one thing that would be suggested is trying out and piloting your survey. So you come up with your survey and then you pilot it on a small group of people. You ask them for their feedback. You might even ask them other people to proofread the questions, right? Because sometimes we're looking at this over and over again. We might miss something that somebody else gets. So these are sort of the essential pieces of information that you would need to know to constructing a survey or constructing survey research or collecting survey data. And so with that, I'll leave you with our terminology for chapter 7. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch. I'm more than happy to answer. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will catch up with you tomorrow. Or sorry, not tomorrow, Wednesday. Have a good one.